Get started. Good morning, everyone. Apologies for not being able to be there in person. Hope everyone had a good holiday. We'll go ahead and get started with our quarterly commission meeting. To start, I want to recognize the members who are in attendance. I see virtually we have myself and Judge Daly. Matt, can you let me know who is attending in person?
Yes, we have Judge Marsico, DA Bible, Judge Taylor Smith, Judge King, Professor Rago, Attorney Balkovic, and our two ex officio members, Chairman Fox and Secretary Harry, here in person.
All right, awesome. Well, I thank our judicial members for representing the commission in person. Moving right along, we'll open it up to see if there's any public comment. Is there anyone waiting to provide public comment?
No one in the room with comments.
Okay. All right. Then moving on, we'll go ahead and make a motion to approve the fall quarterly business meeting minutes. Do I have a maker of the motion?
So moved, Judge Daly.
Moved by Judge Daly. Can I get a second?
I'll second.
Who was the second? Sorry.
DA Bible.
Seconded by DA Bible. All right. All those in favor, say aye. All opposed? All right. Minutes are passed. And with that, I will pass it to Matt for the executive update.
Great. Thank you. So I'm going to start just by talking about the budget that was just passed and a little bit about where that puts the commission and how things stand. So I think there were two components of the budget aspect here. One was our request for additional appropriation, as we've talked about a lot, that the appropriation we received didn't even cover staff salaries, nonetheless, the operations. And then the second part, of course, is the budgetary impasse itself and what impact that had on the commission and the tenuous spot we were in for that 4-month period. But I'll start with the good news, which we did receive our appropriation, and we went from $2.553 million, which we had flat funding for 7 years, to $3.053 million. So a $500,000 increase in our appropriation. So I think it's really important. I want to thank all the members, the ex officio members, for all their efforts in helping the commission come up with a strategy to approach the legislative and members with obtaining that budgetary increase. That was really important. And I also want to thank the staff who were very patient and understanding during this challenging time. The implication that we talked about in September with the budgetary impasse was that we were probably going to run out of money and have to furlough staff. And we went through that process where we had a real tightening of expenses too, where we made sure we limited travel everywhere we could. We tried to save money. But with the appropriation, now, of course, we're whole, and I'll come back to that in a moment. And also want to thank Penn State University and Dean Lang. During that period, working with the university, they stopped billing us or invoicing us for our salaries. So we just paid July, August, September, and October's salary this week. And so that was about $800,000 or more that we paid for our salaries for those 4-month periods. So without that assistance, we would have run out of money, probably furloughed all staff and closed the commission's doors and then had to restart. So we'll take a look at the budget numbers and where we stand and where we are with our reserve account. We had to draw down a lot of our reserve, but we still have a lot of money left in there. We'd like to rebuild it back. And again, I think that really appreciative of everybody's efforts in this quite challenging times for us. And I think that as we move forward now with this extra money, I'll be working with the chair and the vice chair on a deliberative strategy. We have 4 vacancies that are still open, thinking about what our priorities are, but doing this with fiscal caution to make sure we continue to have reserves and not, of course, spend all this money that we just received. So before I move on to the regular part of the business meeting, I'm wondering if anyone has any comments or questions. And again, we'll look at the budget stuff shortly in the meeting.
Matt, I just wanted to thank our leadership on this commission, our chair and vice chair, for their guidance, and you and your team, because it was scary times, and I don't think people fully, I mean, everybody in the room does, but I don't think others fully appreciated it. And so I'm grateful to you for your efforts. I just wanted to thanks.
Yeah, and Matt, if I could add, and I want to thank all the legislators that got the extra funding. I'm the Speaker of the House's appointment. I met with her about a month ago, and she's a huge fan of the commission, huge fan of the work that you guys do, and I think a lot of legislators. I know it's always difficult. It's a big state, it's a huge budget of where the money goes, but you know, I want you guys to know that your efforts were certainly recognized by a lot of people that make those. Happy to see some extra money.
Yeah, I'll jump in as well, and really just want to commend Matt for just being willing to do whatever it took to get in front of legislators to make this happen. You know, I know we had you, myself, you know, and Vice Chair Marsico had lots of calls strategizing and coming up with next steps, contingency plans, whatever it took. And, you know, you were always up for whatever we thought was going to be the next wacky idea to try to get it over the edge. So yeah, just really want to commend and highlight your commitment to doing whatever was necessary to get the funding. And I'm really grateful and glad that we got to this resolution. So thank you.
I'll echo what everybody said, but especially thanks to the legislative members, you know, both in the House and in the Senate, who, without their pushing, I don't think we'd have been here. And Matt's constant intercessions being, working with the different legislative members, it was really nice to see at the end. And I think they know now, not the members have always known, but other legislators, to B.A. Bible's point, you know, I think appreciate what the commission does. I think we did a good job highlighting some of the work the commission does. And yeah, just some random staffers I've talked to recently now I think have a better feel for what's going on. So kudos. Great. Well, thanks again to everyone for your assistance with that. I just want to note for the record that Representative Bonner has also joined us virtually now. And I just want to take this opportunity to welcome our two new members to the commission. We have Judge Natasha Taylor Smith, who is appointed by Chief Justice Todd. Welcome. And we have Judge Megan McCarthy King, who is appointed by President Judge Lazarus of the Superior Court. So welcome. Okay, I will turn it now to our ex officio members for an update.
Okay, thank you. Just a couple quick updates. First, I wanted to thank you guys for your work on the veterans report that you put out. That is certainly going to be helpful for us and really a guiding framework for future evaluations of our veteran service units. So we appreciate, I know that was not an easy task and lots of different areas that you had to meet with to get that done. So appreciate that. As you're aware, we are closing the Quahana Motivational Boot Camp as well as the State Correctional Institution at Rockview. So the populations have been reducing every week. We are down to 817 inmates at Rockview and 139 at Quahana. As you also know, a lot of our JRI-2 cases, such as SD, State Drug Treatment Program, SSP cases, boot camp, do go to Quahana. So the boot camp will be transferring to SCI Houtzdale. We've already done trainings for the staff, and we will be transferring that program to Houtzdale. And then Cambridge Springs will be doing boot camp for the females. So again, they did training, and actually Cambridge Springs will be opening up their boot camp December 15th. And I think that's all with closures. And then lastly, just an update on Strong R. We have done a lot of work to improve quality assurance of the risk and needs assessment. We've done a lot of trainings to enhance inter-rater reliability, virtual trainings, in-person trainings. We're certainly improving across the board, so that's a positive sign. And we're in the process of validation. So our research division has looked at the data and pulled everything together, and we'll share that with our vendor, and then we'll obviously work to make some adjustments on the tool itself. So so far everything's going well, so appreciate it.
I would just like to echo the Secretary's comments on the veteran report. I shared that with the board, with the senior staff. Everybody was very much impressed with the level of information that was provided in that report. It's been a fairly quiet quarter for us. There isn't much to report on. We're going to try to, we have one of the things that is exciting on the horizon is that we are, in our business, we are very much into assessing and compiling information around making a good parole decision. And we've come to realize that the adoption of some AI instruments may be helpful for that. And so we are working with the Commonwealth to try to be on the front end of that. No parole system in the world, as far as we know, is actually using that responsibly in any way to help compile our data and assess our decisions. So we're trying to work with that, which is exciting. The year end is coming, and it looks like at least our recidivism statistics and our violence statistics are trending in a positive direction again this year. So those are all positive things. We don't have all the final numbers on all that. So and we continue to work with the commission on a regular basis, and we certainly appreciate the support that we get from the commission.
Great. Thank you very much. I think one just element is, and Brett Miller, our manager for research and data analysis, will be talking about the finalization of additional evaluations that were conducted this year and this quarter. But we will be working and talking with DOC about the potential to evaluate other programs. These are no longer statutorily required from the commission, but working with them on possibly a state drug treatment program evaluation, but coordinating with them on continuing to look at what programs work and are they cost effective and how do they work in terms of reducing recidivism. But as you've heard me talk about a lot, is also thinking about other behavioral health outcomes, especially with a program oriented towards substance abuse. So we'll be talking more with Secretary Harry and her team about potential collaborations. So we have, obviously, as I mentioned, 2 new members. And so all the terms for all the commission members ended on September 30th, 2025. And so we went through the process of appointments or reappointments for all members. And as of now, we have 10 of the 11 positions have been appointed. And as you know, if the individual hasn't been reappointed, they continue to serve until reappointed or until a new appointment is made. So we're waiting on that final reappointment or appointment to be made. And I just want to, especially to the new members, on page 24 of our book, we have a listing of committees. And we rely on these committees midstream between these meetings to share drafts, to get ideas and information. And so I'll be working with Ryan and also the chair and the vice chair to make new appointments on this member committee list. And I think that in the upcoming year, we'll hope to leverage and utilize those committee more and get that input between commission meetings, especially on our education and outreach efforts, the technology work, and then maybe earlier drafts of some of our reports from the research and data analysis unit, getting feedback from members before we move forward. So, however, an important part of this meeting is an election for chair and vice chair. So as the commission is reconstituted on October 1st, this is our first gathering where we have our election of the chair and vice chair. So with that, I will turn it over to our counsel, Professor Mystic, who will run the election process.
Thank you, Mr. Executive Director. This is the legislatively mandated time for the reorganization of the Pennsylvania Commission on Sentencing. There are two positions to fill, chairman and vice chairman. We will now accept nominations for chairman.
Mr. Mystic, I'd like to nominate our current chair, Representative Krajewski, for the position.
Representative Rick Krajewski has been nominated for the position of chair. Are there any further nominations? There being no further nominations, the nominations are closed. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Congratulations, Chairman Krajewski. We will now accept nominations for the position of vice chairman. Are there any nominations for that position?
I make a motion.
Again, I'm sorry, I hate to hog the floor, but I'd like to nominate Judge Marsico.
Is there another nomination? Or a second nomination of Judge Marsico? We can do this by acclamation.
I'll second that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any further nominations? There being no further nominations, the nominations are closed. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Judge Marsico, congratulations.
Thank you, Professor, and thank you to the members who are willing to serve as chair and vice chair.
Thank you, everyone.
So moving down the agenda now, we'll take a look at some of the fiscal issues or fiscal situation. The first is, and this is again because of the impasse, it's somewhat interesting to just have received our budget for this fiscal year and now be talking about our budget request, which we'll do in January, but we'll kind of work our way through this where we are. So one of the items just to highlight is that every year the commission is audited by an independent firm, Boyer and Ritter. And this is the last of our 3-year contract with them. We did an RFP and selected them to do 3 audits for us. That audit should be available by the end of this calendar year, and we'll share that with the commission in the March meeting. Also, we'll work with the chair and the vice chair to develop an RFP to request another 3-year audit, 1 per year, obviously, and put that out for bid, hopefully at the beginning of the calendar year. So that's where we are as far as our audit goes. We're in an interesting situation because of our relationship with Penn State University, but also being a legislative agency, that because of that arrangement and the way that our funding works, Penn State does not want to provide an audit for us, and the legislature does not want to provide an audit. So that's why we rely on this independent external group. And just for reference, the audit costs roughly $10,000 for us. So not a huge expense, but an important component.
Yes, we are constitutionally required to remain subject to an audit, as are all legislative agencies. So whether we were to contract for an audit or not, we would remain subject to one. It's just that both of our principals declined to audit us because of the relationship with the other principal.
Okay, and on page 28 and 29 of our notebook materials, this is the fiscal 25-26 fiscal year. And I just want to highlight, of course, our operating budget of $3.8 million. It's worth just noting one more time that we have 22 full-time equivalent positions on our organizational chart, and we're currently operating with 18 FTE positions. Some of that, of course, because of the budgetary challenges we were facing. So in the coming weeks and working with the chair and the vice chair, as I mentioned, we'll be looking at those vacancies and seeing where our priority is and potentially posting some job openings to fill those vacant positions. Again, working with Ryan, the chair, vice chair, as well as the unit managers, identifying where our biggest need is, but not filling all of them because we'll be back in the same situation with quickly where we don't have enough money to pay our bills again. So we're going to be very cautious as we proceed. But I think certainly posting a position in January seems like a good strategy, especially given the workload. And then, as I mentioned, we were just invoiced, and this invoice was roughly $900,000, which included that 4 months through October to pay Penn State for our salary. So once again, a big thanks to the university and the College of Liberal Arts for understanding and being a great partner for us and realizing the role that we play for them as well as they play for us. So it was a testament to that continued partnership with Penn State. So on page 30 of the notebook materials, this is our existing bank balances, and I just want to highlight two things there. One is our new appropriation, which is about 2/3 down of $3.053 million. And then the other thing to highlight is the reserve account at the top, that we have $308,000 left in reserves. That was roughly $750,000, and it stood at $750,000 for 7 or 8 years, but we had to utilize some of that for our operating expenses. And I'm hoping, and I think given the budgetary impasse and the need for reserves, to slowly build that back up over time to get it closer to that $750,000, where we have 2 to 3 months worth of money in case there's another impasse or another challenge that confronts us. So the only other thing to note on there is the JRI-2 money. We see that there's $500,000 of JRI-2 money that we still have. Fortunately, we didn't have to burn through that to keep our operating expenses going during the impasse. And that's been earmarked for the CASER, the replacement software of SGS Web, and talk about that shortly. So I guess we'll talk about it now. The next action item actually is to approve on page 31 the service purchase contract with Carbon Creek. Carbon Creek Consulting continues to work with us on this development of the new application. We've had really great experiences with them, and working in this model of quarterly contracts seems to be effective, that we can define the work that we want to accomplish and have the right individuals working with us. So I'll turn it to the chair to seek a motion for approval of the service purchase contract.
Thank you, Matt. Is there a motion to approve the service contract with Carbon Creek?
So moved.
Professor Rago first and Judge Marsico second.
All right. Made by Professor Rigo, seconded by Judge Marsico. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes.
Great, thank you. And the last item on my list for the executive update is our budget request. As I noted, we're going to be compiling a new request, and on page 33 is a summary of our budget request. And this budget request includes two things, just to highlight that it includes the 22 FTEs as operating expenses. And it also has built in a 3% increase for staff salaries as the projected 26-27 operating budget. I think if you compare the two columns, just something to note is we continue to have a reduction in travel. Some of it is the restructuring of these meetings that begin at 11, allowing some members to come, of course, and not spend the night, but also the remote status, allowing folks to do that. We continue, and Bobby will highlight this, to do a lot of our educational opportunities remotely. We hope to also do more face-to-face, especially as we roll out and implement CASER and have to train individuals on that. So after the new year, I'll be submitting that budgetary request, and our projected operating expenses for fiscal year 26-27 is $3.8 million. And I will be working with the chair and the vice chair on crafting that budget request, and hope again to submit that in January. But seeking a motion for approval of the operating budget and the budgetary request.
Thank you, Matt. Do you have a motion to approve the budget request?
Also move.
All right, I think was that Professor Rago again?
Mark Polkovac.
Yes, moved by Dave. Welcome back. Is there a second for the motion?
Professor Rago, second.
Seconded by Professor Rago. Thank you. All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes. Thank you, Matt.
Great. And with that, I'll turn it over to Ryan for an administrative and outreach update.
Thank you, Matt. And good morning, everyone. Can you hear me okay? There we go. All right. I'll take a few minutes of your time and provide some updates on the administration and outreach section of the unit. And then following my update, our manager, Robert Seasock for Education and Outreach, will come take my place and provide you some additional updates on educational efforts. One of the things that I wanted to note, and it's at the top of the slide here, are some continuing outreach efforts that we have. And I wanted to highlight them because I think they're unique, and in particular that the executive unit usually partakes in these rather than the education and outreach unit. So we would miss it if I didn't say it now for Bobby's section. But this Tuesday, as an example, I was at the basic prosecutors training for the new ADAs and any new DAs. And this has been a long-standing relationship that the commission has had with PDAI. And I just wanted to note, and we appreciate from a staff perspective to be available to the PDAI and provide information to their new ADAs on sentencing and the guidelines. And we do that twice a year. And typically I co-present with a DA, usually DA Chardo. And that's been sort of the standing relationship for a number of years. And it's a really nice opportunity for us. Also, and this is a newer collaboration in terms of more systematic from year in and year out. Over the years, the commission has been asked to attend the new judge school. I think it used to be called, and I don't know if I should say it, the baby judge school, but I believe it's just new judge school now. And so one of the things that we have worked closely with AOPC and their educational branch is to try to get the commission some space there, at least to raise, sentencing matters and guidelines for new judges coming onto the bench. And we really appreciate Dr. Filer at AOPC. He has given the commission some space at the new judge school. Last year or 2 years ago, I participated and co-presented with several judges, and it's a unique opportunity. Spend a few minutes just highlighting sentencing and all things guidelines, and then with the judges, we'll actually provide real cases to those in attendance, and the judges facilitate a really healthy discussion of those matters with all the judges in attendance. And so we just want to note and appreciate AOPC. I will be participating in that again in January down in Bedford Springs. Something that I didn't put on the slide, but I'll mention, and this is in collaboration with Bobby, we work throughout the year work with bar associations across the state to try to provide opportunities for their membership, the private defense bar. We do a lot with court systems, and we're often in the public defender's office and space, but we also try to work with the bar associations. And Bobby and myself just confirmed this morning an opportunity to provide a session for Montgomery County's Bar Association. And so Bobby can speak more to his efforts to build out that area, but I just wanted to note, while you see prosecutors up there and judges, we are trying to hit all aspects of the criminal justice system in Pennsylvania. The second main bullet you see there are our educational partnerships. Clearly, Matt had talked about our relationship with Penn State. And through our MOU with Penn State, we also teach a course at the undergraduate level. So just as a report out that there's one more week left in the Penn State semester. And so I think whoever is teaching that is looking forward to that week coming and going rather quickly. Not because of the students, they're great. It's the long fall semester. We also have an MOU with Duquesne, and we teach a course at Duquesne Law School, and that semester wrapped up a week ago. And we again appreciate the relationship with Duquesne and the opportunity to talk all things sentencing with future prosecutors and defense attorneys, certainly in Pennsylvania, but throughout the country. And then the last bullet that you see there is Villanova. We have an MOU with Villanova in which each year we participate from a commission standpoint in the Villanova Sentencing Workshop. And I know we have several Villanova Sentencing Workshop alums sitting in front of me today, so we appreciate all of that participation in the past. And right now, Professor Chanenson at Villanova and myself are wrapping up the final administrative tasks that we need for the upcoming workshop, which will begin in February of next year and conclude in March. And so I just wanted to give that update. And then the final thing that you see on the screen is the annual report. And you've been hearing me talk about this, I believe, all of the year. We have drafted it. Brett will provide some updates on the data side of the annual report, and we hope to get back to that in the beginning of the year and have something in the near future to publish. And so, as you've heard me in the past, and maybe for the benefit of our new members, COVID delayed some annual reports. Other projects have delayed annual reports, but I think we feel pretty confident, I can speak for Matt, myself, that we're back on track and we'll be, getting on to the work of the 2025 annual report pretty shortly. So I'm going to be brief as usual. Thank you.
Good morning. Hopefully that works. I have a couple updates. For the benefit of our newer members, I'll probably be a little more in detail than I normally am, but I will still be brief to keep the day moving along. Just wanted to highlight some of the work of the education and outreach unit. So for our new members, I have a unit of education outreach specialists that receive practitioner questions from people across Pennsylvania. So far through the end of October, we've had 203 role requests to our SGS web application, and we've received and assisted 1,175 inquiries from practitioners through that platform throughout the year so far through October.
Excuse me, sorry, Bobby, can you
Yeah.
speak a little bit more into the mic? We're having a hard
Sure.
time hearing you.
We've also received and responded to 37 inmate requests and 4 right-to-know requests. In terms of our educational programming, as Matt and Ryan had indicated, we provide regular seminars throughout the year. Throughout this calendar year, we had sentencing basics, guidelines basics, determining prior record score workshop, a walk through our SGS web application, legislative lunch and learn, commission news, an offense gravity score overview seminar, and a seminar on sentencing enhancements. Throughout this year, we did 53 total sessions in those formats for 82 hours of content and over 1,000 attendees throughout the year with those. In addition to the live seminars, we have e-learning modules. So for those that are newer, it's more like a self-paced seminar that people can go through and take. So we have 7 different options for them to absorb the content that we have for you as well. We also have a YouTube channel. So if you haven't checked it out, I would recommend you check our YouTube channel and subscribe. We would like to get over 100 and we're very close. And we're looking to add to that content as well. We met a couple weeks ago. Attorney Bolkovic joined me for our Education and Outreach Committee meeting. So thank you for, again, Attorney Bolkovic for joining us. We covered that, and those highlights are in our meeting materials, so I will not bore you with the details. Beyond those recurring courses, as Ryan had mentioned earlier, we're routinely speaking at other events. So Brian highlighted PDAI that he had done. I had a session earlier with the Allegheny County Criminal Law Symposium. We did a session with the Philadelphia Bar Association, as well as Pennsylvania Bar Institute. And we are also going to be engaging with the Montgomery County Bar Association early next year. So we'll give an update about that at the March meeting. Beyond those, staff also present at the County Probation Officers Association Basic Training Academy, as well as the Parole Board's Basic Training Academy. So those happen a couple times throughout the year that we've provided content. Just to give a thank you to my unit, Tiffany, Jen, and Krista are the ones that are the real faces of the work and answering those questions for practitioners. So thank you to them for all their work this year in all of that. We also assist, Christy, she'll give an update shortly with the testing of the new replacement application to SGS Web Caser. I don't want to steal any of her thunder, but we've been working with her and doing some of the preliminary testing. And so that's been a big effort for us of late. Something new that I'd like to share with you all is we've created a LinkedIn profile. So pretty excited for this, trying to branch out our outreach. So we thought this is a natural progression in that. So it's in its infancy. We're building out what we're going to do, but it's going to be a LinkedIn page for the commission, not just focused on education and outreach. I'll be managing the content on that page. And, you know, as we have evaluations from Brett's unit and other information that would be useful to an audience that would like to consume our content, we will be posting those updates regularly. And then, of course, and more selfishly, just another platform to promote our educational programming that we'll have. So look for more information on that as we build it out a little bit more fully. We just created the page recently, so it's very brand new, but I just at least wanted to provide you with a visual of that. Related to that, my unit has been working on the 2026 calendar for our educational programming. That information will be released here in a couple weeks, and we're looking forward to a newly formatted approach to our Zoom seminars for next year. The last part that I'm going to spend a little bit more time on is related to our outreach with resentencing. As I mentioned earlier, we started in May reaching out to our county practitioner, our chief probation officers, related to the reporting of resentences. Our statewide reporting of sentencing is at a very high level, 98% for the last year. On the resentencing side, we are not at that level, so we took some time to work with our county practitioners to try to get them first aware of that requirement that's in place, but also to understand the data that we have to put together and how can we better serve and assist them in making sure that they're able to report that. So the initial outreach, we were able to connect with 45 of the chiefs, and we had meetings with them and staff in their respective offices through the summer. At that point in time, I went back with Brett and the data unit and just gathered some of the feedback that they had. We refined what we were providing to them. And over the last couple weeks, Ryan and I have had conversations with 5 counties just to have more detailed information with them, and also to try to develop some best practices of what they're doing. Are there any gaps, and what are areas that we can make more general recommendations as we're moving forward in the new year, just to try to make sure the counties are reporting the resentences to us a little bit more fully. So that's been the task of priority of late for myself and Ryan in trying to hold those meetings and get that information. So over the next several weeks, we'll work and put together a package of information for counties more broadly. And as we start the new year, we will look to engage and have some best practices and other recommendations on ways for us to be able to help and support the counties in making sure that they have the resources available to them in the new year as they're hopefully reporting more fully the resentencing information. Those are my highlights. I'm happy to answer any questions you all have. If not, I will pass it to Matt.
Great. Thanks, Bobby. And big thanks to your unit for all your efforts. And this resentencing component is really important. And I'm happy we're making progress on it, and really glad that the counties are receptive to that. It's additional work and making sure that it's done systematically, and of course the same in every jurisdiction. So again, thanks to Bobby and also the research folks for digging into that. So I will now turn it to Sure.
When I was talking about the MOUs with Duquesne and Villanova, I failed to mention some interesting interactions that I had recently, and this is consistent with past years, but I just wanted to say that the opportunities to teach at these universities for the commission certainly can be self-serving in terms of whoever is teaching it, but it's an opportunity for us to impart on the future generations of attorneys within Pennsylvania, the uniqueness of Pennsylvania's system, right? And as I was at the PDA on Tuesday, I had two former Duquesne Law School students come up that had taken sentencing courses and were really appreciative of, you know, that exposure at law during their law school years prior to their work within the district attorney's office. And then, you know, I'm getting ready to present, and two former Villanova sentencing workshop students showed up and they said the same thing. So I just wanted to say to the commission, I think these MOUs, they've been longstanding, but they are really vital to the work of the commission and providing that support moving on into the future for our attorneys coming into what is a complicated system. So thanks.
Great. Thanks, Ryan. And I think that's a nice segue to go to Noah Painter Davis, our other deputy director, to talk about our research partnerships. And I think we have some really exciting activities underway that Noah will highlight.
Throughout the United States more broadly. And as part of that, we had an event, the Criminal Justice Research to Practice Symposium, on Friday, October 17th, 2025, at Penn State, that brought together researchers and practitioners from criminal justice agencies to explore how partnerships between universities, sentencing commissions, and state agencies can be used to improve and speed up the use of evidence-based practices and policies to improve public safety. The event was completely sponsored by the Criminal Justice Research Center, independent of our MOU with them, with Penn State, and coordinated and led by the Sentencing Commission. The key focus of this event was the power of research practice partnerships to make research more useful to practitioners and to the public more broadly. Research practice partnerships are long-term collaborations between researchers and practitioners that are designed to address problems of practice. An example of them would be our relationship with the DOC, in which we do research that helps inform their practices. Other examples would be us coordinating with Penn State researchers to help link them to issues such as sentencing. Evidence-based practices are important because they can improve outcomes. They can reduce recidivism, reduce costs, improve health, improve other outcomes that can be impacted by criminal justice contact and public safety issues. However, only a small percentage, a very small percentage of evidence-based practices, and this is a statistic from the field of health, less than 20%, ever make it into clinical practice. And those that do make it into clinical practice often take over a decade to implement. Also, evidence-based practices often don't work because they don't take into account the nuances associated with local context. Research practice partnerships can help close this research gap, in part by building collaborations that help ensure that research topics are focused on problems that are relevant to practitioners. Collaborations can also help us better address complex problems by drawing on the expertise of practitioners, researchers, and community members more broadly. We had presenters from Penn State Social Science Research Institute, Temple University, Allegheny's Criminal Justice Division, Texas Christian University, and the University of New Mexico. And we use this initial symposium to help spur future collaborations. Sentencing commissions are important to this process for a variety of reasons, including because we are viewed, at least the Pennsylvania Sentencing Commission is, as honest brokers. And we are also able to link practitioners to researchers who can be trusted to carry out strong research. Some of these collaborations that we're working on include a collaboration with Allegheny County's Criminal Division and initiatives to study other outcomes associated with the criminal justice system, including health outcomes. This is a movement to move beyond studies that just focus on recidivism. The other thing I'd like to talk about is our other research partnerships, and this includes with Carnegie Mellon University and the Capstone Project. So Pennsylvania's General Assembly is currently considering House Bill 1454, which, if passed, would expand the Pennsylvania Commission on Sentencing's authority to develop guidelines for bail and pretrial release conditions. And these guidelines may be based on factors such as the seriousness of the offense, the defendant's criminal history, the risk of harm to the public, prior failures to appear, and the availability of community support systems. A major goal of this bill is to create more uniformity in the setting of bail by magisterial district judges, as practices vary considerably across Pennsylvania's 67 counties. And a goal of this bill is to reduce any biases related to race, gender, age, and income of the defendant. One way jurisdictions have attempted to promote fairness and consistency in pretrial release decisions is by relying on pretrial assessments that predict public safety risk and or failure to appear. And then judges can use these tools to help inform their decisions pre-trial. And because they draw on objective data, they reduce the likelihood of bias. As part of their system synthesis capstone project for the fall semester, master's students in the public policy and management program at Carnegie Mellon University's Hines College are developing preliminary pretrial release tools that predict recidivism pre-trial. They are also working with Professor Mystic's law students at the Thomas R. Klein School of Law at Duquesne University. And they're doing this as for the Pennsylvania Commission on Sentencing. We are their client. And it is another instance of us drawing on some of the expertise at the local universities and in the Commonwealth through a research practice partnership, help us get a head start on this project in case the bill passes. And commission staff are helping the students with the project, providing guidance and feedback. They have met with Representative Bonner, who crafted the bill, to hear more about his rationale for introducing the bill. Thank you, Representative Bonner, for meeting with the students. It was a powerful meeting. The students have also met with magistrate judges in Allegheny County to hear more about how they craft their pretrial decisions. This system synthesis project will continue next semester. So currently, the students are creating a tool to predict recidivism, the likelihood of recidivism before trial. They are now predicting failure to appear. Next semester, they will predict failure to appear. So this is a long-term relationship, and this project will help the Sentencing Commission and the Commonwealth broadly. Any questions?
Okay, thank you, Noah. And I'll just add, I think I mentioned this at the September meeting. This is our 10th collaboration with Carnegie Mellon, and that relationship, really proud that it continues. And I think that we elevated that by adding in the folks from Duquesne, the law students. So we have math, science people, and we have law people, and it's been a really amazing partnership with them, and continued, and hope we have that opportunity to work with them again. As I noted in September, a lot of times we are reactive to what we're told to be doing and working on, be it veteran studies or evaluations. And this gives us a little extra bandwidth to be proactive. So if the bill passes or doesn't pass, we certainly will learn a lot about pretrial and know what existing tools there are in other jurisdictions. And also, it's helped us understand the data that we have from AOPC in that space and be thinking about strategies that we would use to develop the actual tool. So also want to thank one more time Representative Bonner. It was really great to have him join us by Zoom and meet with the professors who sponsored that from Duquesne as well as Carnegie Mellon, but really meeting with those students and providing practical experience both from a legislative side as well as from his time as a prosecutor about what goes into making those decisions and what that early stages of that process look like to the students. So it was really invaluable, and we appreciate him donating his time and meeting with us. So with that, I will turn it to Christy Bundro for an update on the Application Information Technology Unit.
Still morning. Good morning. Should be able to say from current slide. There we go. Is it presenting? Not presenting. You're fired. All right, thanks. I don't have a lot to update on, so I will be brief as well. So I'm mostly going to talk about the project to develop the Commission on Sentencing Records Exchange application, or you've heard it called CASER. So just for our newer commission members and kind of a reminder to everybody else, CASER is being developed to replace our legacy SGS web application, which is used by courts and practitioners across the Commonwealth to generate sentencing guidelines for criminal cases, as well as to then submit the sentence information back to the commission to use for research and data analysis and to develop policies. So the project is being executed by our in-house applications and information technology team. We have partnered with the agency Carbon Creek to supplement our team as needed with specialized skill sets. So I appreciate the commission allowing us to continue that relationship with Carbon Creek by approving that service purchase contract earlier. You hear? All right, my clicker does not seem to be working. All right, I'll just use the arrow. Nope. There we go. Now it'll work. So up until about 6 months ago, we were progressing pretty closely to the original timeline. Since then, we did have a few challenges come up that have caused a little bit of a slowdown. One of our staff members left us, and so we did replace her with a new consultant, but it always takes a little bit of time to get someone onboarded and have, get them up to speed. And then we also had a pretty significant update that needed to be made to our legacy application. And so some of the team members had to divert their time and effort for a little while to make those updates, as well as, with any new application development, sometimes you do it one way and then you realize that doesn't quite work and there's rework involved, which sometimes delays as well. So at this point, we're tracking about 1 to 2 months behind our original schedule. So we're going to adjust our target dates by about 6 weeks just to kind of realign everything. So this is our new project plan with those adjusted timelines. The highlighted yellow rows are what we're working on now. So they're the tasks that are happening now. So the development team is currently focused on building functionality to support the resentencing guidelines. And then we're also actively collaborating with the education and outreach staff to perform user acceptance testing on the sentence submission features. And so this testing involves replicating real cases in our test environment so that we can validate the results of the new application against the data that we have from our production SGS web application. And then issues discovered during this testing, as well as feedback from the testers, will be addressed and incorporated into the application as we develop it. This is kind of our roadmap of features that we're developing. So you can see we're about halfway, or a little more than halfway through the project. Just to highlight a few of our recent accomplishments, we did complete the core sentence submission components. As I mentioned, we're testing it. And we also recently incorporated feedback that we received from some of the commission members on the guidelines form. And then we've also made several enhancements to our application's homepage, including implementing some key action metrics and a recently viewed cases shortcut, as well as many improvements to our error handling in the application. So these next few slides, it's going to be hard to see on the screen, and I apologize, but these next few slides kind of show the recent pages in the application that we completed. The one you see here is the page that users will enter the sentence for specific offenses on, and then they have to also provide a reason if the sentence does not conform with the guidelines. This page is where users specify the sequence of sentences if there's multiple offenses, and so they would specify whether these sanctions are to be run concurrently or consecutively. We have this page, which collects extra information about the sentence, so it's mostly related to eligibility for some of the corrections programming. And then this page just basically provides a summary of the sentence information that they've entered so they can validate that it looks correct. And then they can also print a report from this page with that information on it, which looks like this. So while CASER development continues, as I kind of mentioned, we do still have to maintain and enhance the legacy SGS web application, since that's what the courts across the Commonwealth are using. We recently made several updates to it, including implementing dispositional departures for 8th edition, for our 8th edition guidelines. And then we have also made some fixes for a few offense-specific issues related to ethnic intimidation and terrorism offenses. And then we also had to make a correction to the domestic violence enhancement logic for inchoate offenses. And then we also made some minor formatting improvements to the 8th edition guidelines form, which I'll ask Judge Marsico if he noticed or not. We increased the font size.
That's the main thing. Very helpful. Thank you.
Yes. So all of this work basically just ensures the, accuracy and continuity of the application while we continue to develop CASER. Beyond system development and application support, I will just mention that we recently had a clean audit performed by PSP, and we passed our audit. So that just confirms that we are complying with the required policies and procedures. And then lastly, I'll also report that in terms of system usage, we had over 93 sentences entered into SGS Web with 2025 sentencing dates. So that's it. So just to summarize, we do have to modify our CASER timeline, but we continue to move forward and make a lot of progress. So any questions? Right.
Okay, as Ryan cues up the next set of slides, as you know, the 8th edition guidelines became effective on January 1st, 2024. So we're almost 2 years in now to the new guidelines. And we wanted to take this opportunity to share with you a preliminary look at how the guidelines are working in practice by looking at some of our data. So I just want to start with this caution that we still don't have a lot of 8th edition sentences yet. So I feel confident we've been waiting and waiting that this little snapshot will give you a first look. But one thing to think about is that set of data representative of all the cases that will be sentences imposed in the future under the 8th edition. So what we had said earlier was the cases that were working their way through the system are probably less complex cases because that have the offense committed and then the plea or trial and then conviction and then leading to sentence takes a while for court processing. So we may have a sample of less complex or less serious cases. So once Ryan puts that up, we'll make a comparison as a first step to data from 2023, just to say, what are we even looking at as it relates to the sentence? Is there a way to put it? All right, we're going to try to blow this up for the folks here because there'll be some numbers and data. But as you know, as I just started, we have this new edition and we're wanting to see what's happening with it. There's been speculation about potentially what's going to happen with conformity to the guidelines, with the narrower ranges. So I wanted to dig in a little bit on that, share that. Perfect. Thank you, Ryan. Okay, I'm going to move. The clicker's not working. Okay. So this is a figure that you would have seen previously, and this is the sentences from 2024. And in blue are the 7th edition sentences imposed and submitted to the commission, and orange is the 8th edition. So if you remember at the end of 2024, we said that in December, about half of the cases were now 8th edition cases. So at the end of that first year, we were starting to see more and more 8th edition cases. But out of that entire year, we only had 23% of the sentences were in the 8th edition. So we didn't really want to dig into the data because, again, what kind of cases would those be? So Ryan mentioned about the annual report, and I just wanted to highlight one of the challenges for the staff is now we have 2 editions of the guidelines in practice. So how are we going to report out on this? So there are many tables in the annual report that are just aggregate. So this is the number of cases reported by county. We would have combined for 2024, both 7th and 8th edition in one table. When we get to the issues like conformity, we have different terminology, different set of guidelines. So we're going to have 2 sets of tables for those in the annual report. So on the left is our 7th edition, and on the right is the 8th edition, which includes now the dispositional and durational departures, the different definitions that come with the new guidelines. But again, when we publish this, there's just be a note of caution that annual report will only include 19,000 cases from the 8th edition. So when we start breaking that down by county class, type of offense and different things, we just have to be careful that it's not necessarily maybe reflecting changes in the guidelines, but in fact, just this unrepresentative sample of these early cases that move through the system. So when we come to 2025 now, again, the blue is 7th edition sentences and the orange is 8th edition sentences. So in 2025, from January to October, those first 10 months, now we're up to 60% of the sentences were from the 8th edition. And we see we're almost at 75% of all sentences being imposed are from 8th edition cases. So we felt that this now was enough data to do this first preliminary look at the 8th edition. So what we did was we ignored those early cases from 2024 because, again, they're probably less complex, and focused on this subset of 2025 cases. So we have on the left, for comparative purposes, we decided to use a year where the 7th edition was still the guidelines in place. So we're looking at 2023, the last year that all the cases were from 7th edition, and we're going to compare that to the 10-month period of the 8th edition sentences. So it's notable, again, we have 45,000 cases in the 8th edition on the right and 75,000 on the left. So it's not even a full year's worth of sentences. It's like about 60% and then we only have 10 months rather than 12 months. And so as I started with that cautionary note, I just want to highlight when we were working on offense assignments for offense gravity score for the new 8th edition, just as a reminder for commission members, we relied on 3 years worth of data for that. So here we're only looking at 10 months and only 60% of the 10 months. So again, just a note of caution that this may not be a perfect sample. And I think in this context also, we know that there's changing crime rates. There's different things happening in the Commonwealth, not just changing the guidelines. So what I want to just spend a little time is, are these samples close? Can we, how typical is our 10 months? So if we look at the top row there, we see on the left for the 7th edition, about 4.5, 4.6% of the cases, sentences imposed were for felony one. When we look to the right, it's 2.8%. So maybe we're seeing again some less complex cases because they're still working their way through the system for those felony one cases. And then on the bottom, we see for misdemeanor 2 and misdemeanor 3 that we have a slightly higher representation in the 8th edition guidelines for those less serious cases. So 14% compared to 16.8 and 8.4 compared to 10%. So in the aggregate, if we were going to say is our samples comparative, they're close, but I think, and my apologies that bottom ribbon is covering it, but in the 7th edition, 30% of the cases, 30.5% are for felonies. In the 8th edition, this small sample, it's 26.4%. And when we look at misdemeanors, it's 69.4 compared to 73.6. So while this sample is a lot better than the 2024 data, we still might be underrepresented on more severe cases that continue to work their way through the system. But I think it allows us to cautiously look at how the guidelines are working and some of that data related to the guidelines. So as part of the same comparison was to look at what type of cases are coming through the system. And there actually are more danger to person cases with this 8th edition guidelines and more property cases. And interestingly, fewer drug cases. So again, I'm not positive if this is a reflection of the changing of this composition as crime trends change in Pennsylvania, or if this is just because we have a limited sample that we're looking at. Okay, so now digging into the guidelines themselves. As you know, we have a different conceptualization of prior record score. And we now have a true zero for prior record score, where previously we allowed some misdemeanors, and we have expanded lapsing provisions under the new 8th edition guidelines. But what's notable here is that prior record score 0 remains the most common prior record classification, pretty close, 41% to 45%. And then our highest level on the 8th edition 4 has very few individuals in that, which would be consistent with the RFEL REVOC categories under the 7th edition. So again, we plan in the future to dive and dig in a little more, but with our limited number of cases here, we can't do much more at this point other than just see what the frequency of those prior record categories are. Then these are the guideline levels for the recommendations when we have the intersection of OGS and prior record score. And this is for the 8th edition. And when we look at this, I think a couple things that are important to note is that just like in the previous guidelines, most of the cases are on the bottom of the guidelines themselves. So that 84% of the recommended sentences fall within level B, probation, and level C, county confinement. So at the top, we could see the recommendations for state confinement is about 10.7% of the cases. When we looked at 25 years of data related to state confinement, if you remember, the confinement rate is about 10 to 12% of all sentences in Pennsylvania. 10 to 14% are sentenced to state confinement. So when we look at now, these are shifting to actual sentences imposed, not what the guideline recommendation was. What were the sentences that were imposed under the two different guideline editions? So state confinement is lower here, 6.8% compared to 11.2. And again, is this a function of the guidelines, or is this a function of our sample or changing trends? We don't know yet. And so what is maybe more illustrative and interesting to look at are these more simple cases. We know we have a lot of those. And we see that probation is the level is about the same, 42% compared to 42.7%. And we're able here to dig in and look at the duration that was imposed for the probation terms. And I think one of the interesting things for the new guidelines were an emphasis on reducing the long durations because we actually have recommendations of probation duration on the guidelines themselves. And we see a reduction in those that are over 3 years from 7.5% in 2023 to 4.7. And then interestingly, the average are very similar duration and the median is identical at 12 months. So at least from the perspective of the probation sentences being imposed, they look very similar to what was under the old guidelines and maybe a reduction on those longer probation durations. Okay, so I also think, again, our first look here at conformity. This was a big thing for the new guidelines by reducing or narrowing the ranges of the recommended what's in the cell. So if you remember, there would be cells that were RS to 9 under the old guidelines, aggravated up plus 3 months, so really RS to 12, with no recommendation of a sanction type, allowing for restorative sanctions all the way to state confinement within the guideline sentence. So under that model, we see 63% of the sentences were within the standard range recommendation, and roughly 80% were within the guidelines, aggravated and mitigated. This is under the 7th edition. So 63% standard range, 80% within the guidelines, and very few above, mainly below as the departures compared to above. This is our first look now at those 45,000 sentences on conformity for the 8th edition. And we see here that even though we have these narrower ranges, we still have 41% within the standard range. So when we then look at within the guidelines, aggravated, standard, and mitigated, we add that up, about 70% within that same footprint, whereas it was 80%. So I think there were some hypotheses that we would have sentences all over the place, outside the guidelines, departures, because of the narrowing of the ranges. And I think, we spent a very long amount of time making those OGS assignments that were consistent with sentencing practice in the Commonwealth by looking at 3 years of historical data. So it looks like, the guidelines are working maybe at a higher level for conformity than we anticipated. And so I want to end with just a couple notes about future work for this. So I think this conformity analysis, we don't have enough data to do more detailed dives. Where are these departures happening? So if we were to look at durational departures below, is it for certain types of cases? Is it drug cases? What are the cases? Is it for dispositional departures from prison recommendation, state confinement to county confinement or to probation? And we could start developing that kind of profile, but we need a lot more data to be able to cross it that way. And then I think one of the hypotheses that I have, and this goes back to the RS to 9 example. So when we were reviewing the assignments for OGS, we were thinking of the median sentence, and we would see restorative sanctions, and we looked, for example, at burglary cases. And it would go all the way up to state confinement, and then we'd say, the median is 4.3 months, and so that was our assignment for jail. But we had this huge range because any sentence would fit under that standard range, and then, of course, be allowing for aggravated beyond the 9, et cetera. So our hypothesis is, and we need a lot more data for this, is if we look maybe at that same burglary case, and now the recommendation might be 5 to 8 for that sentence for the standard range, plus or minus 3, maybe the distribution of sentences gets narrower because the starting point is narrower. And so we see by looking in the aggregate that a lot of them are still in that aggravated, standard, mitigated. If we thought about a normal distribution, it would get much tighter around the recommendation. So when we're thinking about consistency, proportionality, maybe the guidelines, these new guidelines, while we're seeing very similar patterns and trends, maybe we don't have that massive disparity, if you would, across the Commonwealth for specific types of cases. Now, that's just a hypothesis. We don't have enough data. That burglary example, I think from 3 years of data, we had like 400 sentences because we looked at prior record score 0 and focused in removing the impact of prior record score on the sentence. We're going to need more data to do that. But I think it's a really interesting first look personally, where changing the prior record score, but narrowing those ranges, providing specific recommendations for the type of sentencing alternative for each cell. We see that judges around the Commonwealth are conforming to the guidelines at a really high rate. And so I'll pause there before I turn it to Brett Miller for other things, just to see if there's any questions about this first preliminary look at the guidelines.
Matt, isn't it a dramatic, it's 10% less though, isn't it?
It is, but we would anticipate if it's RS to 9 for standard range, and now we say 5 months to 8 months, that we were going to see a decline. But I also think by adding the dispositional departure, we're seeing, you could see for the above, we're getting 15% there, where before we only had 1% or a handful of percent because the way the guidelines were structured.
So how do you do conformity? Like, one of the new things we have now is, like, I don't know, it might say 2 to 4 and then RC, restrictive conditions. Is a restrictive probation sentence, I would assume, be conformity? Would a jail sentence be conformity also?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes. So we could dig into this. We'll get 2 more months, a couple more months, maybe in March, we can certainly revisit the conformity piece and see if we can add a little texture to this. I did do a whole bunch, or my colleagues as well, looking at it by level and by offense types. And like I said, the number of cases was just too small. We saw a lot of strange things that were just a function of having 17 cases and trying to break them into different categories. Okay, well, thank you. I'll now turn it to Brett Miller, who will go through some of our recent evaluation work that we have completed. And also in the notebook materials, Brett will emphasize, is the preliminary report for the risk revalidation for the Commission Sentencing Risk Assessment tool.
Good afternoon, everyone. So in the research and analysis unit, we're right on the cusp of wrapping up what's been a pretty busy year for us. We've had, in addition to our regular day-to-day and annual work, we've also had 3 fairly significant mandated reports that have all come due all at the same time this fall. So back in September, we just submitted our final report for the Veterans Project, SR 196. We also have our second evaluation of the short sentence parole program at DOC, which I'll go into in a little more detail in a few minutes here. And then, as I talked about at the September meeting, we also conducted our first full revalidation of our sentence risk assessment instrument. So it's been a busy few months, but I think we're right on the edge of wrapping those things up. And so I just want to say thanks to all of our full-time staff for all the work and effort that's gone into all of this and maintaining all of our day-to-day work, like I said. So it's been a big effort, but I think we're closing in on the finish line here. And in regard to the risk assessment validation, again, I summarized that in quite a bit of detail in September. But basically what we wanted to do and we're mandated to do is, after the risk assessment has been in implementation for about 5 years or so now, we wanted to take a look at some of the underlying data in that risk assessment model, refresh some of our analyses with new data and see, is this model still predictive of recidivism? And does it still look like this is a fair, unbiased instrument that's correctly categorizing individuals into low, typical, and high risk of recidivism? And so what we found out, we took data from 2015 and 2016, applied it to our model. And what we found out is that the model continues to be very accurate as in comparison to other risk assessment models that are out there. And in fact, it looks like it might even be even more balanced when looking at things like gender and racial bias. So the model performed very well. We're about 5 years into using the instrument. And I think at this point, we're confident that we can keep moving forward using the same model, and there's no need for any adjustments to the model. So we are just in the final phases of wrapping up those two evaluations, short sentence parole and risk assessment validation. We'll be submitting those in the next 2 weeks or so here, and then kind of turning our focus towards 2026. Ryan mentioned earlier our efforts on the 2024 annual report. So as he mentioned, we've been playing catch up for a few years now, trying to get back on our typical schedule for these reports. I think we're almost there. So we're just wrapping up sort of some of the data tables that Matt just showed, that those make up kind of the reference book element of the annual report. But I think we'll have those wrapped up before the end of the year here too. And then looking ahead to the 25 report, I think we should be able to get back on schedule and look at releasing that report sometime closer to the summer or fall of next year. In terms of the parole guidelines, I think we're about 18 months into using the guidelines now, the state parole guidelines. And for about a year now, we've been creating quarterly reports for the board, looking at those decisions and guideline recommendations. We continue to see conformity rates to the guidelines above 80% for both violent and nonviolent cases. And then also earlier this year, for the first time, we produced individual decision maker reports. So for both the 9 board members and also all of the hearing examiners, we gave each of them kind of an individual sort of packet of information, looking at their own decisions over the course of the last year, and then comparing that to their colleagues and seeing, are there any areas where maybe I'm looking at things differently than my colleagues, and not necessarily making recommendations to change behaviors, but just trying to increase awareness of where people stand on certain aspects of the guidelines. I think that's been going well, and we continue to work closely with the board and hope to keep doing that into the next year. I think I'll kind of just wrap up my overall review here, but we continue to be busy with external data requests. I think we had somewhere in the range of 15 requests over this past quarter. About half of those are academic. The other half come from the General Assembly or from attorneys throughout the state. So continuing to stay busy, and I expect more of the same in 2026. So with that, I'm going to move into just kind of an overall summary of our short sentence parole evaluation, unless there's any questions about just the general updates.
I just have a quick question. Just what type of like request do you get from the General Assembly? Just, you don't have to go too much into detail, but just like 30-second.
Yeah, most of it has to do with when there's pending legislation, like they're about to go and vote on a bill, they'll come to us, and just mostly, I think, to get an idea of what's the scale of this impact. How many cases do we see of this certain offense type that might be impacted? It's a lot of that kind of stuff. All right, so I talked about short sentence parole. It feels like for 3 years or so now, but we do have a couple new members, so I think I will just one more time go through what short sentence parole is, how the program works, and then I'll give kind of an executive summary, just breeze through some of the final results we have for our evaluation. So the short sentence parole program is a program at DOC. It was implemented in 2020. And basically the idea is to identify nonviolent inmates at DOC that have relatively short sentences, so aggregate minimums, no more than 2 years. And the idea is to save some administrative time at the parole board and to reduce the number of bed days at DOC by releasing some of these inmates immediately upon their minimum sentence date without the traditional parole interview and parole review process. So the program really is designed to be kind of a cost saving measure more so than a rehabilitative program. It's more about increasing efficiencies. So this is our, like I said, our second evaluation of this program. Our first one back in 2023 was very preliminary. The program had just started, but what we found was it was saving money. It was reducing bed days at DOC. And in addition, it seemed like there might be some side benefits where the participants of the program were committing fewer misconducts, maybe as a result of knowing that they had this opportunity for an early release. And then on the recidivism side, we found that these individuals weren't necessarily lower risk in the community in terms of general recidivism, but they performed no worse recidivistically than their peers. And it's all in all, it seemed to be a net positive, looking at no change to public safety, but also saving some money in the correctional system. Kind of went through the eligibility, and then just quickly comparing the standard parole process to the short sentence parole process. What we found is the median sentence for someone that's in this program is a minimum sentence of 12 months and a maximum of 36 months. So the way the typical standard parole process works is when you get to your minimum date at 12 months, you're eligible for your first parole interview. You go and do the interview, and for these types of inmates, that grant rate tends to be right around 50%. So you've got a 50-50 chance of being released at your min date. If not, you wait one more year and you come back for a second interview. And so in this example, we show someone went through the parole interview process, was denied on the first interview, and then was released at the second interview with 12 months remaining until their maximum sentence date. So they had 1 year of parole supervision. So this same person under short sentence parole, they would bypass that parole interview and just immediately upon reaching their minimum date, they would be released and then serve the remaining full 2 years of parole supervision time until their max date. Back in September, I gave some of our preliminary results. Just in terms of usage, the program has steadily grown each year, but it's kind of settled in somewhere right around 700 individuals every year are being released through this program. We also found that individuals that are released through SSP are more likely to be female, more likely to be white, and more likely to be a little bit older than the typical DOC release. And as I mentioned, we also found that there's some behavioral benefits that might be happening with that understanding that there's a possibility for early release, or so fewer misconducts for SSP participants. Another interesting thing that we found is when you look across the county classes, so we have 8 county classes sorted by population. The first class county is the largest, 8 is the smallest. But what we found in comparing where these SSP releases come from compared to the rest of DOC inmates, there were some differences in the sense that SSP releases with these shorter sentences were about twice as likely to come from the smaller counties. So 4th through 5th, or 4th through 8th, the more rural counties, they were more likely to be represented in this program. And then if you look at the 2 largest county classes, which is essentially Philadelphia and Allegheny counties, you're much less likely to be involved in the SSP program if you're coming from these counties. So we talked a little bit in September about what might cause that. One thing might be sort of a difference in perception of these levels of offenses between the rural and the urban areas. So we're looking at a lot of property crimes in this group, a lot of mid-level drug offenses. And so some of these, maybe in larger counties, are more likely to get probation or to get county jail. whereas the rural counties are more likely to sentence to state confinement. Then one area we really wanted to look into, because I think it's a concern that some people have about short sentence parole, is that when you're releasing these inmates earlier, some of them might have substance use disorders or other issues. They might not have as much time to complete DOC programming if they're involved in this program. So we took a look first at how likely are SSP participants to participate in any programming during their time at DOC. So again, these sentences can be as long as 24 months, but in general, we're finding that the majority of them are less than 12 months. So these could be 6-month, 8-month sentences. So we did find that SSP releases were less likely to participate in programming. So only 58% participation for those SSP releases, in comparison to 75 up to 83% for other groups at DOC. So I think obviously a large part of that is just because of that shorter stay at DOC. But then we took a look at the mandatory programming, which mandatory programs are assigned by DOC based on the needs of an inmate. And so these would be, if someone does have a specific rehabilitative need, these are the programs that DOC staff would try to prioritize and get this person into a program as quickly as possible. And so what we found out on mandatory programming is that if these SSP participants are able to start one of these mandatory programs, they're in almost all cases, they're able to finish it. Same thing for when we looked at other short sentences at DOC, less than 2 years. I think what it shows is that DOC staff is really prioritizing getting people into these mandatory programs and getting them finished, especially for individuals with short sentences. And then you see, even all other DOC releases, not quite as high, but still above 90% that they're able to complete these mandatory programs. So I think that combination of factors, or maybe not able to participate in as many programs, but obviously prioritizing and focusing on the mandatory programs, I think that shows DOC staff's commitment to making sure that those get finished. In terms of recidivism, I don't think we talked about this last time, but in our first evaluation, we had a very limited follow-up period for our recidivism study. So we weren't able to look at a full 3 years like we typically would. We also weren't able to wait to find out whether a case resulted in a conviction like we normally would. So we didn't have a lot of faith in the recidivism results we had last time. And this time we feel like we've got more confidence. We've got full 3-year follow-ups for all of our different DOC release groups. And we're looking at new arrests that led to a conviction, with the arrest being within that 3-year period. So what we find, especially focusing on the 3-year recidivism rates, is that really there's not a whole lot of difference between any of these groups, so between the SSP successful releases, the people who started on the SSP track but were denied release on it, the other short sentences, or just general DOC releases. They're all right around that 25% range after 3 years. The other thing to note here is that these are all very low recidivism rates for 3 years. And so this is something we've been noticing for a few years now, is these rates keep getting lower and lower as we do more and more of these projects. So this is something that we've also heard from some of our fellow agencies, that they're seeing similar trends. So Matt talked about a little bit with looking at the 8th edition guidelines, where there's some of these results. It's hard to know, are these things the result of a program or of new guidelines, or are they just the result of shifting crime rates throughout the state? But another important thing here is that, even though the SSP releases were 1% higher than general DOC releases here at 3 years, what we found is that those differences are not statistically significant. So essentially, there is no difference in recidivism rates between any of these groups. If we break that down a little bit further and look at what types of recidivism people are committing, here we find that there are some differences. The overall rates, general recidivism are essentially equal. But if you start looking at crime types, crimes of violence, SSP releases are much less likely than the other groups, about 5 times less likely to commit a crime of violence. So we are seeing one of the requirements of the program is to be a nonviolent offender. We're seeing that they're continuing to be nonviolent even after release. And then again, to get into these programs, there's a certain offense type profile that you kind of fall into. One of those is that the majority of these SSP participants had offense types of, like I said, mid-level drug crimes, DUIs, and really a lot of property offenses. So what we see is after release, and this is showing percentage of total recidivism for that group, but about half, 44% of total recidivism for SSP releases is from theft. And then if you just look at the misdemeanors, so tallying of all of these different misdemeanor offense types, we find that SSP releases are committing misdemeanors with the recidivistic offenses in 59% of cases, whereas the general DOC population releases, they're tending to commit more felonies, 55% felonies, compared to almost 60% misdemeanors for SSP. So even though overall recidivism rates are the same, it's a different type of recidivism and possibly less impact to public safety. And finally, one of the primary goals of the program is to be efficient and to get these individuals through the system and back out onto the street as early as possible. What we found is that DOC has been effective in doing that. We looked at the median of when was your minimum sentence date compared to when were you actually released. Well, the median is 0 days, so they're being released right at their min. Then we compared that to other individuals who were eligible for SSP but were denied release, and the successful SSP releases are being released more than 100 days sooner than their counterparts who had the same sentence types, and more than a year earlier than just a general typical DOC inmate. So if we sort of start breaking some of these things down numerically and looking at the costs and benefits, what we find is that over the course of 5 years, we've had more than 3,000 individuals successfully released on SSP, which works out to about 700 each year. The typical savings in terms of being released early is 106 days. And if you multiply those together, that turns into 74,000 bed days saved annually at DOC. Using the marginal cost value for a single day of confinement at DOC, that works out to about almost $3.5 million saved at DOC annually, just through the savings in bed days. On the other hand, those individuals that are released and create the 74,000 savings in bed days, well, that equates to 74,000 additional days of parole supervision. So the daily cost for parole supervision is quite a bit less than the cost of having someone in confinement, but that does work out to about an extra $1 million in cost for parole supervision each year. This cost is also partially offset by supervision fees that are assessed to parolees, but that's nominal. So essentially a $1 million increase to supervision cost. Just kind of in conclusion and wrapping up, so far through 5 years, SSP has provided a net savings, your DOC savings minus the extra supervision cost. But there's a net savings of $2.45 million each year to the state correctional system. What we found is the recidivism rates, the general recidivism is essentially equal, but it's different types of recidivism, where the SSP participants are less likely to commit crimes of violence and less likely to commit felonies. So I think in conclusion, the program is designed to increase efficiencies, save the Commonwealth money, and protect public safety. I think just in a nutshell, I think that's exactly what it's done. The short sentence parole program has been successful in reducing correctional costs and has maintained public safety in the process. So with that, I can take any questions.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you. This is good news. I mean, this is really what it was designed to do. And I remember when it was first implemented, I was working inside. So it took a minute even from the classification piece to weed them out and where they went. But I think now that we have a system going, it's working as intended. So good to see. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
So I'll just add two things related to the report. One is to thank DOC staff and also to thank the chairman who we've been working with on reviewing a draft of this final report. And I think one of the additions to this report from the previous one as well is we have a lot of detailed information about how the program works. And we didn't previously have that. And working with Jim Stover at the Department of Corrections has been really insightful for us, making sure we understand how the program is intended to work and how it does work. And secondly, we hope to share a draft of that report with you sometime next week, and we'll be submitting to the legislature. I think the due date is December 18th. So we'll be sending that off in the next few weeks. And again, big thanks to our staff. You could see these evaluations that we're tasked to do require merging and matching and using a lot of data from partner agencies, be it the Department of Corrections, Pennsylvania State Police for rap sheets, court data. So it's a significant investment of time for the commission, and we're glad, of course, to do it. And I think that's part of our mission, as Noah indicated about these research partnerships, is sometimes the commission serves in the research side of it, and other times we're the practitioner and other people are doing research for us. So it's a really interesting position for the commission to work with our partner agencies on defining what programs work, which is really important for the Commonwealth. With that, I'll turn it to Ryan, and we have one final action item after Ryan's update of the calendar items, and then adjourning the meeting.
Okay, this will be very quick. Just a note to say that in your supplemental, we have some information, pages 57 through 76. Bobby's unit in the education outreach, specifically Maria Jello, tracks all legislation for us at the commission, as well as case law. And I won't put you through any review of that, but just wanted to note that we do that in terms of if anything would impact sentencing or the guidelines, we can be on top of it. One other thing I wanted to mention is building off of what Bobby said earlier in terms of supporting the 8th edition implementation, and as Matt went over with all of the initial data analysis, his unit is on the front lines, I guess you could say, in terms of receiving phone calls and providing assistance. But one of the things I think that we do well and is a fundamental part of our process is to track our inquiries. And so staff follow along with the requests that we're getting for assistance to see if there's any trends and if there's any areas in which staff can provide clarity to the guidelines. But also importantly to note that in the future, should the commission ever consider, a revision to the guidelines or see a need to revise the guidelines, that we, from a staff perspective, can inform that process through all of the inquiries that we track year in and year out. So just to note that information is available to you. And as Matt mentioned, the action item here, these are the commission meeting dates for 2026. In the commission supplemental, you have, in the commission notebook on page 45, there's a year calendar that you can see the dates. What we would be asking for is approval of the 2026 meeting calendar. So I'll turn it to the chair for that.
Thank you, Ryan. Is there a motion to approve the 2026 calendar?
Judge Taylor Smith moved.
Judge Taylor Smith, thank you. Is there a second?
DA Bible, second.
Seconded by DA Bible. Thank you. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes. Thank you.
And we'll turn it or keep it with the chair to adjourn the meeting.
Okay, great. Is there a motion to adjourn the meeting? Guess we all want to stick around, huh?
Judge Smith
All right.
and Judge
Motion-
King, second.
All right. Seconded by Judge King. All those in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Matt. Thank you, Ryan.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Everyone, enjoy the rest of your day. Take care.